boys and girls. Welcome back to story time today. Before we start our story time, I want to share with you something I received in the mail on Saturday. My friends, I received a letter. And boys and girls, this was addressed to me. This is how the mailman knew to bring it to Mrs. Hilsher's house. But up here, there's an address and there's a name. It's a last name. And since we've been learning each other's last names, I know you'll know who it's from. It says Hilsher. Do you know who wrote me this letter? You got it. It was Hayden. I want to show you something really quick. On the back of the envelope, he put a sticker. And it's a picture of a cardinal. And these words say this is Hayden's favorite bird. We talked about cardinals, didn't we? Before we left, when we were still at school, we talked about cardinals and how they are the state bird for Ohio. Now, I wonder, Hayden's favorite color is red. Do you think that's why a cardinal is his favorite bird? I don't know. We'll have to ask him sometime. Boys and girls, I want to show you his letter because he did a lot of writing in this letter. His mommy wrote some words, but a lot of the words on top of the lines are words that Hayden wrote. Wow, Hayden, good writing practice there. But I thought I would read you the first sentence. It says, "Dear Mrs. Hilsher, what I miss most about school is recess." I miss recess too. And friends. Boys and girls, Hayden misses you. And I know you all miss Hayden and all your friends. Boys and girls, I wish we could be together, but we can't right now. So a good way for us to be together is to listen to stories together and to think about each other and to pray for each other when we're not together. All right, my friends, are you ready for the story? Today is the second part of the story of the first Easter. Now, Mrs. Hilsher is going to do a little bit of a review so you remember how the story started. Remember yesterday we talked about how Jesus rode into the city on a donkey. He was in a place of honor on the donkey, and he rode in, and the people waved the palm branches, and they said, "Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed to he who comes in the name of the Lord." They were celebrating him coming. And then, boys and girls, we learned that Jesus had a special supper with his friends, the disciples. Do you remember what we called that supper? You remembered very good. It was called a Passover. Passover is a special supper. Boys and girls, and then we said Jesus felt a little sad because he said one of his friends, he had 12 of them, but one of his friends was going to turn him over to his enemies, to the bad guys. Boys and girls, and we said, if you look real close right here at this guy, his name was Judas. He's looking pretty guilty, isn't he? And Jesus does look sad in this picture. And then right before we ended yesterday, it was Jesus in the garden praying. And we said, while Jesus prayed, his three friends that he asked to go up with him to pray fell asleep. So boys and girls, let's pick up where we left off yesterday. When Jesus came back to the three disciples, he found them sleeping, and he asked them if they would pray with him. But they fell asleep again, boys and girls. He went and he prayed 2 more times. When the disciples awoke, they heard the noise of a crowd, and they saw the flashing of torches. These are torches, and they have fire on them. And it's kind of like today we would carry a flashlight or a lantern. This was kind of like something to give light so that they could see. The crowd was armed with swords, with clubs, and with spears. Judas rushed out from the crowd, and he greeted Jesus with a kiss. as though he was glad to see them. Like we might hug someone and give them a kiss. That's what Judas did to Jesus. The crowd knew that Judas would kiss Jesus to betray him. They grabbed Jesus, and boys and girls, the Bible tells us, they arrested him. One of the disciples near Jesus drew his sword, and he cut off the ear of the slave of the high priest. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he healed the slave's ear. Boys and girls, the Bible tells us that he picked up the slave's ear and he put it back on the slave, and it just went completely back on his ear as if nothing had happened. Jesus didn't want his friends being unkind and being mean and hurting each other. When Jesus' disciples saw that he would not allow them to fight, they ran away. The crowd took Jesus to Caiaphas. He was the high priest. He was the person in charge. After a mock trial before Caiaphas, the crowd took Jesus to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, who ruled over all Judea. So this is Pontius Pilate. He listened to their complaints about Jesus, and he offered either to set a criminal free, Barabbas, or to set Jesus free. See, Pontius Pilate, he knew poor Jesus wasn't guilty, and he said, okay, here's your choice. I could set a criminal, a bad guy that was already in jail. I could set him free or set Jesus free. And he thought for sure the people would pick Jesus. But boys and girls, the crowd wanted Barabbas to be set free. So instead of telling them to let Jesus go, Pilate washed his hands. He let Barabbas go, and he let them have Jesus. So this was Pontius Pilate. He felt bad, and he felt bad that the people said, we want Barabbas, the bad guy, the criminal, to go free. So he went over to this little bowl of water, and he washed his hands, and he said, I wash my hands of this. He didn't agree with it. And that was his way of telling all the people that he didn't think they were right. The crowd cried, crucify him, crucify him. So the Roman soldiers took Jesus out of the city to the place called Calvary, or Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. It's because, boys and girls, the mountainside looked like a skull. They had made a huge cross to crucify Jesus on. A great crowd of people followed Jesus and the soldiers. Some were enemies of Jesus, glad to see him suffer. They did many wicked and painful things to hurt Jesus. They beat him. They took a rope, we call it a scourge, and they beat him. They put a crown of thorns on his head. But others were friends of Jesus. Some women followed him and they cried. Jesus turned to them and said, do not cry for me. The soldiers, they tried to make Jesus carry his own cross. But soon, Jesus found he was too weak from all the suffering. He couldn't carry it. They chose a man named Simon who was passing by, and they made him carry the cross to its place at Calvary. Boys and girls, Simon helped Jesus carry the cross because he was too weak. My friends, when they came to Calvary, the soldiers laid the cross down and they stretched Jesus out on it. They drove nails through his hands and through his feet to fasten him to the cross. They stood the cross upright with Jesus upon it, while the soldiers were doing this dreadful work. Jesus prayed to God for them, and he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Boys and girls, even when Jesus was suffering and dying for us on the cross, he said, God, forgive these men. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how bad they're being. Boys and girls, two other things I want to say about this picture. During this time Jesus was on the cross, he said, I'm thirsty. He was thirsty. He needed something to drink. So those men took a stick and they put a sponge on the stick. And boys and girls, they soaked that sponge in vinegar. Now, we've used vinegar for science experiments before, and we know how bad it smells and how strong it smells. Boys and girls, we've never tasted it, but if you tasted vinegar, it tastes very bad. So that's what they did to Jesus. He was thirsty. He needed some water. They gave him vinegar to taste. Also, boys and girls, the Bible tells us that these soldiers at the bottom of the cross, that they took and they had taken clothes off of Jesus, and that they took and they wanted his clothes. So they took dice. We've all seen dice. We've used them for games. And they rolled dice, and they would roll them, and whoever got the highest number, they got to keep the clothes of Jesus. Boys and girls, they weren't honoring or respecting Jesus at all. All right, my friends, this is where we're going to end our story. But I want to give you a little preview of tomorrow. Tomorrow you see the cross with the true crosses beside it. And you see that the sky is very dark. So we're going to pick up our story tomorrow, and we'll finish it tomorrow right here on this page. So make sure you tune in tomorrow to hear the rest of this story, the story of the first Easter. All right, my friends, before we go, I want us to sing our song that I taught you yesterday. Will you sing that with me? Go ahead, stand up and stretch. Give me a big stretch. Stretch up to the ceiling. Now stretch down and touch your toes. Put your arms out to your side. Now lean to the left. Lean to the right. All right, good job. You guys really sat still and were great listeners. Now we're going to sing a song. And you know what? You can stand up as you sing this. Are you ready? Easter time, we have so much to do. Time for bunnies, time for eggs, but time for Jesus too. Easter time, Jesus showed his love. He died for us and rose again. He's with the Lord above. Good job. You remembered that from yesterday. Good job, boys and girls. Give yourself a pat on the back. Great job. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.